My name's Jeff Gray. I'm the CEO and co-founder of Glue Networks. And this has been an extremely exciting show for us. We launched our GA code of our GlueWare 2.0 actually on September 30th, and we just released 2.1 last week. So this is a very exciting time, and we have Rasan Akbar here. I'll let you introduce yourself, but we're really pleased for your time, and let's get going.
Sure. So Rasan Akbar, practice manager at Dimension Data for Hybrid WAN, which is a space that we obviously all know quite a bit about. So I'll jump right in to explain the scope of the effort that we're here to discuss today. So 600 remote sites around the globe, 100,000 end users, right? So not a small network, right? So critical applications in 4 data centers. So if we imagine, right, this must be a huge wide area network to manage, sustain the life cycle on devices, push changes, et cetera, et cetera. So when we think about some of the challenges in this environment, right off the bat, we know that cost is going up to maintain and manage the environment, right? But our budgets are going down, right? So then how do we address this? So we're looking for cost savings. We're looking for simplification, right? So we all would love to hit the easy button, right? But then we know that, unfortunately our lives are just not that simple, right? But in whatever way we can drive simplification in our networks, that's what we're looking to achieve. So obviously we're trying to achieve these things with a lean network staff, right? Gone are the days where we had what I like to say, 3 tiers of networking staff, right? Operations, design, implementation, and then the architecture group, right? So then today we have individuals wearing multiple hats. So how do we get all these things done with less individuals, right? So the traditional WAN limitations. For any of those of us who have had any operational responsibilities, we know what it is to have to wait and wait and wait for our circuits, right? While the vendors are continually pushing those firm order commit dates further and further out, right? So, and then now we have the advent of cloud-based services. So the Office 365s and such, they stress the legacy architectures from a standpoint of the regional or centralized internet model tends to slow things down now, right? So then as cloud applications become more and more prevalent, how do we deal with that, right? So then that kind of leads us right into discussions around the need for flexibility and agility, right? So the business is always asking us to do things quicker and faster, right? Whether we have the individuals to do it or not, it's not necessarily their concern. They want it done quick, right? So then if we're not there and ready to help as quickly as we can be, then we're obviously seen as a roadblock as opposed to being an enabler. So how do we address this? We, given the advance or the advances, if you will, in SD-WAN technology, we're able to match our business requirements, right, some of the things that we had challenges with, to those changes or functionality, if you will, in SD-WAN, right? So then we're able to come up with 3 tiers of branches, right? So let's just say tier 1 was the traditional branch that had dual MPLS, right? Because some of our branches were just a tad bit too critical, and I say our because in everything that Dimension Data and Glue and Cisco does, we adopt the mindset of the client. That was a plug. But to be serious, so tier 1, regular MPLS, tier 2, MPLS and internet, and then tier 3, just sole internet links, right? So these are the 3 tiers that we were able to kind of come up with. Because again, to kind of think you have a one-size-fits-all wide area network is really just not realistic, right? So then in constructing the business case to justify the piloting of this SD-WAN technology, really what we were able to kind of pull out right away was savings, right? So then we were able to target a potential $2 million a year savings just in communication costs right off the bat, right? Which was very appealing to the business, obviously. So we started with the pilot testing of SD-WAN with real-time apps, right? So we say real-time apps, so this is not just our traditional voice and video when we say real-time, right? But those business-critical applications that are being used in the branches as well, right? So in our approach, we were able to achieve automation and agility through the use of Glue Networks, Glueware, right? So then this is, I can't say enough about, what it took for Dimension Data, for Glue, for Cisco to kind of come together and say, listen, let's try and do the best thing, for our customer, right? So without necessarily having to introduce new technology, everywhere necessarily, right? So, how do we make use of existing robust technology such that we're there to protect this client's investment? Jeff, you want to expand a little bit on that?
Sure. Thank you very much. So I think one of the key things for this customer was the reuse of their platforms, as well as adding additional platforms. And so the Glue engine was able to go out and use those assets. And we used Cisco IWAN because they already had an investment in Cisco. And being able to dual home as well as fail over via internet was very important for this customer, as well as using their MPLS core as a universal connector or an integration point. And so we got together and we created a solution, we piloted it, and we rolled out the first 50 sites, if you could go ahead and click. And so this is what is complete and underway. So the first phase here was, the business case was about a $2 million a year cost savings. 50 sites were rolled out. There are ASR 1002s, ASR 1001Xs, ASR 1002Xs, 4300 series, 2900 series, 3900 series, 1900 series, 800 series, and CSR 1000Vs. So this was a big reuse of a lot of equipment, as well as a nice refresh where the customer wanted it. The first phase, 50 branches, 3 data centers, 6 head ends, and now there's an expansion. There was a competitive aspect to this. The customer chose us, and 150 additional branches, 3 additional data centers, 9 additional head ends, and we're thrilled to be able to have data modeled using Glue 2.0 and rolled this into production. Next slide, please. So a little bit of a deeper dive. If we look at the data centers a little bit, zoom in, there are multiple head ends that are daisy chained. The Glue engine, Glue control is able to also automate Cisco IOS CA on the PKI side, as well as branch routers. Every site is dual homed, as well as has the ability to fail over across regions. Phase 1 was not like that. Phase 2 is like that. And so if we look at the zoom in on the branch side, you can also see the dual home, as well as being able to move across data centers in the event of a disaster and be able to use the internet versus the MPLS core. Next slide, please. So this is what we launched as it relates to multi-vendor POC here at the show. And this is focused on data modeling what a customer has and being able to bring a layer of abstraction above that. Not simplifying feature sets or doing a forklift upgrade with a new vendor, but using what the customer has and being able to create a layer of abstraction above it. And so this is what is in production. It's about complex change management, as well as the ability to detect and remediate any unauthorized changes. So we're not like the other SD-WAN players out there. We're really orchestration, and SD-WAN happens to be the first solution. The point of this is that it's model-driven, it's intent-based, it understands the current state of the network at a granular configuration level. If there's any manual or automated changes, the engine can detect it and remediate it in near real time. Next slide, please. So what is in practice? We just want to be very upfront in terms of what is deployed and what's next gen. The 4 ONU use cases: network connectivity, security, application services, and also a service provider, a cloud service provider aspect is in play in production. So first of all, from a network connectivity, it is Cisco IWAN, so hybrid WAN, head ends, CPs, all of those that I listed off. Also, there's an NFV aspect because CSR 1000V from Cisco, and also now we've just created a proof case, or proof of concept of Cisco branch switches in production. And so that is where this customer is moving. Security service chaining, so zone-based firewall, IPS, IPsec, PKI, the ability to move forward with Get VPN, all of this is modeled already. And there's some other security components the customer wants to bring in. A QoS-enabled, fully meshed WAN, as well as setting the stage for performance routing. So this is a matter of rolling out master controllers, and being able to then push out path selection overlaid on top. The most advanced part of this really is getting the routing right. Once you get the routing right, actually PFR is a snap, and Cisco's done a wonderful job on path selection with V3. From a cloud service provider perspective, if you think about this customer, global in nature, actually 100,000 end users now, and it's about multi-tenancy as well. So being able to segment regions, do grouping and filtering and searching and pushing and orchestrating a network in that regard. I think that's it for me. Rasan, you can take it from here.
Sure. I think it's key to mention that, in Glue's strategy, they leverage what's the existing technology while adding new, right? Because it is very easy and I would say ambitious to say that, yeah, we can just add a new device and, it makes the world very easy and we'll just add 100 or 1,000 or 10,000 of these new devices everywhere. However, how do we do that in phases, right? So I think, with the Glue orchestration layer, it allows for that phased approach. So when we talk about lessons learned, obviously, in this particular effort, so right off the bat, increase internet bandwidth and redundancy. So what we're able to do was obviously gain just from the moving to direct internet access and away from MPLS, increase bandwidth, right? And then in redundancy in some areas where we didn't have it before, right? So that was a big win. In addition to that, increased security capacity. So as was mentioned, zone-based firewalling, the ability to do intrusion prevention, right? Because there's obviously, as we mentioned earlier, one of the challenges or one of the requirements for this particular client was effectively to do some internet offload, right? So then, when you talk about decentralizing your internet connectivity, then obviously security is going to become a play in that, right? So then we were able to increase the security capacity as we rolled out the solution. In addition, obviously, so there was the acceptance of, let's just say, less than full path quads for some of our real-time apps. So I think today, luckily enough, technology has moved such that, a lot of consumers out there are using Skype, they're using FaceTime, et cetera, right, which is currently traveling over the internet. So with some education to our user community, we've tended to notice that their, let's just say, acceptance criteria actually has been pretty on par with the experience, especially in those areas where we really needed the connectivity. Areas like Asia Pac or where have you, right? So where traditional CIR bandwidth or dedicated bandwidth, if you will, is way too expensive, right? So then when we moved to that direct internet access link, we found that some of those real-time applications work just fine. So obviously there's a change in support process. Your support staff gets trained up on the new protocols, if you will, a new method of management. However, at the same time, there was great advances, I would say, in the ability to control lifecycle management, the ability to deploy new offices, right? So, there is that term of zero-touch provisioning, but let's just say that we were able to provision networks way quicker, such that we were able to exceed the business needs and requirements. So, some of the financial business benefits. So, as we mentioned earlier, in phase one, $2 million a year was saved, right? That was huge, right? So then the business took a look at that and says, okay, give us more. So in phase two, we're looking at 150 sites. So obviously in phase one, we kind of went at some of our more problem children, if you will, right? So then while we're not seeing a super spike just because we're jumping to 150 sites, I think in that first phase, we definitely got the cost savings and the benefit we wanted. However, still in phase two, we're looking at an additional $1 million a year in savings as well, right? So we're noticing obviously that hybrid WAN is giving us functionality such that bandwidth is cheaper, right? And then more importantly, it's giving us the building blocks to advance in a nice methodical phase approach into doing some of the more complex things like path selection and truly getting that active functionality and what have you, right? So which then leads to our increased agility and flexibility, right, to support these changes. So when we think before of what it takes in this large environment to manage changes or to push configurations or what have you, now I'm not going to say that's made easy, but it's made pretty damn close.